Content warning. This audiobook contains strong language, sexual themes, supernatural elements, and graphic depictions of death. The author recommends this work for audiences aged 18 and over. If you let your 6-year-old listen, that's on you. Moloch, The Real King of Horror by Ian Bailey. Published by Ashlar Press. Copyright 2025. Chapter 4. Feed the Hunger. For the next few months, life settled into a strange illusion of normalcy. Yet the writer carried himself differently now, no longer struggling, but instead grappling with something new. Imposter syndrome gnawed at him. Am I really a published author? Is that what I can call myself now? He moved through the world with a quiet confidence that almost felt like peace. Yet a part of him remained unconvinced. He laughed more, played with the children more, made love to Martha more. At first, she welcomed it. He even spent more time with his mates. But there was something off about it, something unsettling. Maybe Martha just wasn't used to this side of him. It wasn't all affection, not really. It was almost mechanical, as if something inside him was pulling the strings, something that wasn't used to human contact. The passion was there, but so was the detachment. Like he was performing intimacy rather than feeling it. She caught him watching her more than once. Not lovingly, not lustfully, just observing. Studying her closely as if he were trying to figure something out, trying to understand. Every time it happened, a little chill ran down her spine. She prayed this version of him would stay. She loved the attention. But deep down, something whispered, he's still changing. For the new author, the words flowed a little more easily this time. There was no hesitation, no frustration, a trust in the process, an unstoppable force driving his fingers over the keys. The clatter of the typewriter filled the house at all hours, each keystroke hammering out something raw, something dark. Something beyond either of them had ever dared think about before, let alone write. But then, just as quickly, he stopped. Dead in his tracks, crashed and burned like a used puppet that's had a hand stuck up its arse after a long stage performance at the comedy club. One evening, after hours of writing, out of total frustration that he can't seem to pinpoint why he tore the page from the typewriter, crumpled it into a ball, and threw the whole manuscript straight into the waste paper basket. A story he's been working on for months. It was good, but not good enough, he thought to himself. The words on the page sat there like a corpse, flat, soulless, wrong. He leaned back in his chair, staring at the stack of pages as if they might suddenly rewrite themselves. He had pushed and pulled at every sentence, tried to wring something real out of the bones of the story, but it wasn't breathing. It wasn't alive. Frustration coiled inside him, a slow, burning heat creeping up his throat. His fingers twitched. He tried again, but in the end, he ripped the latest page from the typewriter, crumpled it into a ball, and threw it toward the waste paper basket. The motion sent a few discarded pages scattering across the floor like fallen leaves. Martha looked up from the couch, her book half forgotten in her lap. "Everything okay?" "Number." The response was on the tip of his tongue, but something held it back. Instead, he exhaled sharply, rubbing a hand over his face. The trailer suddenly felt too small. The walls felt closer than they should be. "I'm heading to the bar," he muttered, already grabbing his coat. "I'll be back later." Martha barely had time to part her lips before the door slammed shut behind him. The night air hit him like a slap, cold and sobering. Good. Lucky for him, the bar was only a few blocks away. His boots struck the pavement in sharp, deliberate steps, each one echoing louder than it should. He shoved his hands into his pockets, gripping the fabric as if to anchor himself, but his thoughts were already unraveling. It was shit. No, it wasn't. It just needed time. Time? You've been at this for years. How much time do you think you have left? It'll come. Like it always has? Like it did tonight? His jaw clenched. He picked up his pace. The town was empty at this hour, the streetlights buzzing overhead, casting long shadows that flickered when he walked through them. He caught a glimpse of himself in the window of a closed bakery, a reflection that didn't quite match his movements. He froze mid-step, stared. The face in the glass was his. Of course it was. But the eyes, the light caught them strangely, twisting the color, warping them just enough to look hollow. Black. A trick of the glass, the poor lighting. Still, he looked away, kept walking. You're running out of time. Shut up. And yet, you keep throwing it away. Shut up. The words scratched at the inside of his skull, layered over his own thoughts, but they weren't his. He wasn't sure when that had started. The second voice, the one that didn't belong. At first, it was just an echo, a lingering thought that didn't quite feel like his own. Then it was a whisper, curling around the edges of his subconscious like cigarette smoke. Now it was there. Always. The neon bee in Bud's bar and grill flickered erratically, half dead from years of neglect. Inside, the air hung thick with stale beer, old wood, and cigarette smoke that had soaked into the walls for decades. The author pushed through the door, the sudden warmth washing over him. The usual crowd was scattered across their usual spots, old men hunched over their regrets, younger drunks laughing too loudly at things they wouldn't remember in the morning, each nodding his general direction as they salute their old friend as he entered the bar. Behind the bar, polishing a glass with the slow deliberation of a man who'd seen it all, Bud looked up. The bartender frowned. "You look like hell. What's wrong?" The author slid onto the bar stool, dropping his coat onto the seat beside him. "Just gimme a drink, Bud." While muttering to himself random thoughts, Bud didn't move right away. He studied him like a doctor examining a patient who refused to admit they were sick. Something was different tonight. Bud had never seen him mutter to himself as erratic as this. Then, without a word, he reached for the whiskey. A double. Neat. The glass hit the counter with a soft clink. "On the house," Bud muttered. The author didn't argue. He knocked it back in one go, the burn spreading through his chest, dulling the static in his head. The second drink came without asking. Bud poured slow, watching carefully, the way a man watches a wounded animal to see how he would react. The alcohol settled in, warm and numbing. And that's when the voice became clear. "Better, isn't it?" Number. "No, this is just the whiskey talking. Is it? Or is it me?" The author exhaled sharply, gripping the edge of the bar like it was the only thing keeping him from slipping into the abyss. But Bud was still watching, ever closely. "Listen," the bartender said after a long silence. "You've been coming here for years. Never seen you like this. You seem really wound up." Bud notices the writer answering someone who isn't there instead of him. "I'm fine." He snorted as he looks over his shoulder. Bud's brow furrowed. He set the glass down, wiping his hands on a rag before reaching for the phone. "You want me to call Martha?" The author looked up sharply. "What? No. Jesus, Bud." "You're talking to yourself," Bud said, his voice quiet so not to tip off any of the other drinkers. That shut him up. He feels like he's been caught. A long pause. Then Bud sighed, rubbing a hand over his bald head. "Look, man, if you need a ride home, I'll order you a cab. But I ain't letting you sit here and drown in this. Not like this." "I'm not drowning." Bud said nothing. Because he knew. The author knew too. Something was wrong, and it wasn't the drink. Despite his protests, Bud walked into the room behind the bar and called Martha. Martha answered on the second ring. "Hey," Bud said, keeping his voice low. "He's here." A pause. "Is he okay?" Bud glanced at the man slumped over the bar, one hand wrapped around his drink, the other clenching and unclenching like he was trying to hold on to something slipping away. "He's not himself," Bud admitted, "but I got him. I'll put him in a cab when he's ready." Martha exhaled, a mixture of relief and lingering concern. "Thank you." Bud hung up, pouring himself a drink now. He had a feeling he was going to need one before the night was over. Martha went over to his writing nook to pick up some of the trash and generally clean up, and was amazed at the amount of beer cans everywhere. Taken back, she saw packets of white powder hidden under a pile of papers while shuffling papers around. She was furious at first. That arsehole, she thought. No wonder his nose bleeds all the time. No wonder he's frantic 1 minute the nicest guy, then the next, the worst nightmare. It took Martha everything she had not to go to the bar and string him up for it, flush it down the toilet. For Christ's sakes, the kids could have found it. But for some reason beyond her, almost like a thought that wasn't her own, hinted that she should hold off for now, see how it plays out. She might not be happy, but she also recognizes that he is his own man and he's pushing himself hard. If this helps, then who is she to judge? Picking up the waste paper basket by the desk, she sees that he threw away a half-finished manuscript. She hesitated, her hands hovering over the pages, most with erratic handwriting across them. But curiosity gnawed at her. She sat down in his chair, which smelt like sweat. Poor decisions, cigarettes, and alcohol. Settling in, she started smoothing out the creased paper on the little available desk space and began to read. It hooked its claws into her instantly. The writing was unlike anything he had ever done, more vivid, more violent, more real. She felt herself sink into it, like falling into the mind of something inhuman. The idea that a young girl's first menstruation could trigger telekinesis. It was unlike anything she had ever read before, and Martha was well read. This was new to her. A sick thrill twisted in her stomach. She knew this was his work, but it felt like something else had written it through him. Is this what he thinks about when he's high on cocaine? She thought to herself. Martha stayed up most of the night reading the story and woke up to one of the kids looking for her to get some water. The next day, after the kids had left for school on the bus, Martha was drying the dishes after breakfast, watching him recover from the night before with a strong black coffee. She set the manuscript on the counter and slid it toward him. "I think you should finish this one." He looked at her, surprised. "Really? I thought it was a loser." "No," she said too quickly. "I read it last night. It's good. Really good." She saw the flicker of doubt in his eyes. He hadn't planned to finish it, but her insistence seemed to sway him. Even Martha wasn't sure why she had pushed so hard. In the corner of the room, just beyond the dim light, a pleased Moloch watched on. If you looked a little longer, you might just see his eyes disappear into the smoke from the cigarettes that lingered there a little too long. Moloch was pleased that she found it. He doesn't have his claws in her like he does the author, but he can still create events that make her move the way he wants, and he's getting stronger the more they interact. With newfound fervor, he sat at his little desk and reread the manuscript. It took shape faster than anything he had ever written. The words poured out of him, urgent and relentless, as if they had been waiting, clawing at the inside of his skull, desperate to be released. He no longer thought about what he was writing. His fingers moved on their own, hammering at the typewriter keys with a feverish energy that left his knuckles aching and his fingertips raw. Pages piled up beside him, the stack growing taller each night, a monument to something he couldn't quite name. Martha watched on, silent. He had always worked hard, always pushed himself, but this was different. He no longer muttered frustrations when a sentence didn't land right. He didn't pause to think or rewrite. The usual hesitation, the agonizing self-doubt, gone. It was as if something had taken the wheel of his already overactive imagination, driving his hands, guiding his thoughts, and all he could do was keep up. But could he keep up, she thought. He stopped eating at normal hours, skipping meals without noticing. Cigarette smoke curled in thick ribbons around his head, the ashtray overflowing. Forgotten. Often he had to stick tissues up his nose as blood constantly poured out from snorting too much cocaine. The trailer reeked of burnt coffee and ink, the scent soaking into everything, even the children's clothes. The kids learned not to disturb him. Martha would find him in the same spot for hours, back hunched, eyes glazed, lips moving silently as he typed. At night he didn't so much sleep as collapse. He would wake in strange places, the kitchen table, the couch, once even the floor beside his desk. He couldn't remember getting there. His dreams were filled with distorted faces, whispered voices, shifting landscapes that didn't belong to this world. And yet, the story was good, really good. When he read it back, he barely recognized the words. The prose was sharp, alive, humming with something just beneath the surface. It felt like reading a message from something else. When the final page was typed, he sat back, his body trembling, his breath unsteady. He had finished. He had no memory of writing the last paragraph, but there it was, exactly as it should be. Martha stepped across the room, arms crossed, eyes scanning the mess of crumpled pages, cigarette butts, and empty beer cans littering the desk. She exhaled, tilting her head. "Well, you gonna sit there staring at it, or are you actually gonna send it off?" He ran a hand through his hair, still gripping the edge of the desk like it might keep him from floating away. "I don't know," he muttered. "What if it's not as good as I think it is? What if it's just noise?" Martha rolled her eyes. "Jesus, you're impossible." She stepped closer, resting a hand on his shoulder. "Look, if you're waiting for some divine sign from the universe that it's perfect, you'll be waiting forever. You finished it. That's the goddamn sign." He exhaled sharply, tapping his fingers against the desk. "I've sent off 100 things before, and they always come back with a polite, 'Thanks, but no thanks.' What makes this any different?" Martha let out a dry chuckle. "Are you serious? Have you actually read what you just wrote?" She picked up the first few pages, flipping through them. "This isn't some throwaway short story. This is it. This is the one. And you know it." His throat felt tight. He wanted to believe her. Hell, a part of him did believe her. But another part, the part that had lived off rejection letters and self-doubt for years, was screaming at him to hold on a little longer, to tweak a little more, to find an excuse. Martha saw it in his face. She shook her head, nudging the manuscript toward him. "You always do this. You write something brilliant and then you convince yourself it's shit. Well, I'm done humoring you." Her voice softened, but there was steel beneath it. "I'll proofread it. I'll retype it. But you are the one who's posting it. No more hiding behind me. No more what-ifs. You need to do this for yourself." He looked at her, the weight of it pressing down on his chest. Then he nodded. And just like that, he handed the manuscript to her, and the hesitation was gone. A few days after Martha retyped it, she said, "If anything, don't touch it now. Let it dry with the blood still fresh." He didn't argue. For the first time in a long time, he sent it off without rewriting, without fear. No edits, no doubt, just ink and blood and whatever else lived between the lines. And she was right. The response came faster than expected. Major publishers took notice. The rejections that had once piled up, mocking him, never came this time. Tripleday bought the novel he titled Caroline. Unlike his short stories, this was something real, something big. Not quite a novel, but a fat novella, and that was just fine by him. For the first time in his life, he felt unstoppable. The advance check arrived on a beautiful spring afternoon in May 1973. Martha found him in the kitchen, the letter in one hand, the check in the other, his fingers trembling. This was big, bigger than the first check he got for the glass floor, This was real money, life-changing money. This one check was nearly 6 months' salary, and that's not counting the royalties he'll soon get. For the first time in his life, his dream, their dream, was real. Outside, in the shadowed corners of their quiet neighborhood, something waited. Moloch, just beyond the light, just beyond reality, was taking hold in the dark places of his reality. Not just his mind, but his neighborhood, too. And it was pleased, very pleased. With the success of Caroline, things changed overnight. The new-to-them house on Maple Street stood tall and proud beneath the afternoon sun, its white paint gleaming, its small front porch stretching out like a welcoming embrace. The for sale sign was gone now, replaced by the weight of ownership, of permanence. The kids tumbled out of the car before the engine had even fully stopped. "I get the biggest room," their eldest shouted, racing toward the front door. "No fair," the youngest protested, scrambling after his sister, their voices echoing across the quiet street. Martha laughed, shaking her head as she stepped out of the passenger seat. She turned to him, her eyes shining in the golden light. "Well," she said, a smile teasing at her lips, "we did it." He exhaled, looking up at the house, their house, taking it all in. The sheer size of it compared to the trailer they had lived in for the past year. The way the windows caught the light. The two-car garage at the back. The yard that stretched out into actual space, not just a postage stamp of land with a rusted lawn chair and broken toys scattered about. It felt surreal. They had lived in tiny apartments, rented spaces with thin walls and ceilings that leaked when it rained. They had scraped by, paycheck to paycheck, hoping, praying that something would change. And now here they were. The sound of the historical front door creaking open yanked him from his thoughts. "Whoa!" their eldest gasped from inside. "This place is huge." Boots scuffed against hardwood floors as the kids darted through the hallway, their laughter filling the space, bouncing off the walls. The echoes made it feel more empty than full, but that would change. Soon it would be their home, lived in, broken in, cluttered with everyday mess. Martha turned to him, still standing beside the car, a quiet kind of awe settling over her face. "Are you gonna just stand there, or are you gonna help me unload?" she teased. He let out a breathy chuckle, running a hand through his hair. "I don't know. I kinda just want to look at it for a minute." Martha followed his gaze. The house was fancy, and it was theirs. A 4-bedroom home in a quiet neighborhood where the kids could ride their bikes, where she could finally have her own little reading nook, where he could shut himself away in an office that wasn't just a cluttered corner of a trailer. He turned to her, then really looked at her. The exhaustion, the years of sacrifice, the quiet hope in her expression. He walked over to her, still leaning against the old Buick. He reached out, pulling her in, wrapping his arms around her in a rare, full-bodied embrace. She melted into him, sighing against his shoulder. "I'm proud of you," she murmured. His grip tightened slightly. "I wouldn't have done it without you." She pulled back just enough to meet his eyes. "You're damn right you wouldn't have." He smirked, shaking his head before pressing a kiss to her temple. From inside, a crash sounded, probably a suitcase knocked over in the race for bedroom claims, followed by the shriek of their youngest. "That's my room." "Too late. I licked the door." "Oh, gross," Martha groaned, pulling away. "Well, the peace and quiet was nice while it lasted." He chuckled, picking up the nearest box from the trunk. "Welcome home, then." She grinned, grabbing one of her own. "Yeah, welcome home." And together they stepped through the front door. But with the bigger house came more space for the shadows to hide. His fame grew. Newspapers called him a fresh new voice in horror. Reviews raved about his prose. Critics likened him to Bram Stoker, Poe, Lovecraft. But he found no real joy in it. He wanted more. Instead, something else grew inside him, a hunger, a compulsion. He wrote more than ever, barely sleeping, his new big desk still covered in ashtrays overflowing with cigarette butts and more beer cans than you can buy in a case. Scraps of paper littered the floor, filled with disjointed sentences and cryptic messages in frantic handwriting. The bookshop was small, tucked between a closed-down cinema and a pawn shop that hadn't changed its window display in a decade. Inside, the air smelled like yellowed paper and old wood polish. The signing table sat beneath a handmade banner that read, "Welcome local author of Caroline." He sat with a pen in hand, trying to force a smile each time someone approached. Most of them were polite, thrilled even. Locals, teachers, retirees. A woman in a heavy-knit scarf asked if he taught at the high school. A young man with acne nervously told him he wanted to write one day too. Then came the final figure. A man in a gray coat, wiry and pale, eyes too wide and unblinking. He didn't say anything at first, just placed a well-worn copy of The Glass Floor on the table. The author looked down. Every single page had been annotated in tiny, cramped handwriting. Symbols had been drawn in the margins, circles and arrows, obscure runes, lines connecting passages across chapters. "This is thorough," he said, forcing a laugh. The man finally spoke, voice raspy and low. "It's not fiction, it's a map." A silence fell between them. One of the bookshop staff called out that it was time to wrap up, but the author didn't look away from the man. "You drew these?" he asked, tapping the symbols. "No, I just found them," the man replied. "But you wrote them." Something in the air shifted. It was cold, just for a second. The author's fingertips tingled where they touched the page. "Keep it," the man said. "You'll need it for the next one." Then he turned and walked out, disappearing into the street like he'd never been there at all. Martha kept editing his work, careful not to change too much. That was for the publisher. But her fears grew. She had watched him struggle for years, desperate for success. Now he had it. Yet he was drinking himself into oblivion. And it wasn't the alcohol consuming him, it was the hunger. His next novel came faster than the first, start to finish within a year. He barely remembered writing it. The words spilled out in an unstoppable flood, the typewriter keys hammering out something he couldn't take back. But this time, something changed. The nightmares came back. Fear of being violent to those he loved was driving his thoughts and actions. Shadowy figures lurked at the edges of his vision. He dreamed of places that should not exist, buildings that breathed, roads that bled, faces without eyes. Martha doesn't like the corner in the laundry room. She says it stares at her. He woke up gasping, drenched in sweat, the taste of blood in his mouth from his nose bleeds. He started drinking more heavily, trying to quiet the whispers that echoed through the house at night. "Why is Daddy acting weird again?" their youngest asked one evening. Martha tried to brush it off. "He's just working really hard." But even she didn't believe it. One night, she woke up alone. The bed was empty. She found him sitting at his typewriter, staring at a blank page. His fingers hovered over the keys, but he wasn't typing. His lips were moving, whispering, a low, rhythmic chant. Words she didn't recognize, words she didn't want to understand. Despite genuine fear enveloping her thoughts, she stepped closer. "Honey." His hands snapped into fists. He blinked hard, like shaking off a trance, then looked at her as he reached out and gripped her wrist a little too hard. His face was different. For a split second, it was like she didn't recognize him at all. Then, as he released his grip, he smiled, the same warm smile she had always known. "Couldn't sleep," he murmured. "Had a scene stuck in my head." Martha forced a laugh. "Well, don't let it drive you crazy." He chuckled, but as she walked back toward the bedroom, she heard the clatter of the typewriter start again. Click, clack, click, clack, click, clack. Faster, urgent, desperate, and then a whisper, not his, from the corner of the room. From the dark. Martha turned back, but he was alone. The next morning, the outline for Bethlehem's lot was finished, the fastest he's ever done. It would be published later that year, his second book, his second success. But as he sat at the kitchen table staring down at the contract, his hands shook. He knew it now, knew it completely. The words were no longer his own, and Moloch was just getting started. The air in the kitchen thickened, the fluorescent light overhead flickering once, twice, before cutting out entirely. He felt it first, the sensation of being watched, something just outside his field of vision. Then he looked up and Moloch was there, sitting across from him in his fucking kitchen, hands folded, as if they had been having a polite conversation all along. This chapter may have ended, but the story doesn't. Return next Monday for what waits in the dark. Subscribe so you don't miss it, and leave a comment to share what the shadows may have whispered to you.